Have you ever gotten an email telling you you're dead? I did. It had my full name, my birth date, and a certified death certificate from the state of North Carolina. It said I drowned in Tulum, Mexico, 3 years ago. The thing is, I didn't. I was folding laundry in my kitchen when I opened that email, but on paper I had been legally erased. There were hospital reports, signatures, affidavits, none of them mine. I'm Lauren Avery, and for the past 3 years, I've been legally deceased. My life stolen, my identity sold off in an insurance claim worth $250,000. In this video, I'll show you how my parents turned a panic attack abroad into a fake death, how I found out, and what it took to reclaim my name. I have the proof, emails, forged signatures, a payout ledger with their names on it. If you've ever felt invisible, like someone else is writing your story without your permission, you need to watch this before someone decides to erase you too. Before we dive into the story, let's connect. Have you ever felt stuck, searching for the depths of manifestation? Drop a 3 in the comments if you're ready to unlock your true potential, or a 4 if you're still finding your way. Let's start this journey together. I was folding laundry in the kitchen, the soft clink of the dryer shutting off behind me, when I heard my phone buzz. Nothing urgent, I thought. Probably another freelance edit request or a newsletter I never unsubscribed from. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked it up. The subject line made me pause. Claim processed. Lauren Avery, deceased. At first, I thought it was spam, some morbid scam or a phishing email meant to rattle me. But then I saw the attachment, a PDF with a seal from the North Carolina Department of Vital Records. My thumb hovered, then tapped. The document opened with a low buzz from the fridge humming behind me. I read it once, then again. Name, Lauren Elise Avery. Date of birth, March 8th, 1993. Date of death, June 12th, 2020. Cause, accidental drowning. Tulum, Mexico. The laundry in my hands slid to the floor. I didn't even notice. I had been in Tulum that week. My passport got stolen on the second day. I remember the heat, the panic, the ocean that looked like it belonged in a dream and not the real world. I had a full-blown panic attack in a market after losing my ID, but I came home. I remember the red-eye back to Houston, the long bus ride to Austin, the sticky heat of that summer pressing through my t-shirt. I was alive. I am alive. Yet here, stamped and notarized, was my death. A legal artifact stating I no longer existed. "Hey," Sophie called from the hallway. "You want coffee or tea this morning? I'm making eggs." I didn't answer. I just held up my phone. She stepped into the kitchen barefoot, wearing that oversized t-shirt with the Saturn print she loved. Her hands were dusted in chili oil and salt. "What's that?" I passed her the phone, my fingers suddenly cold. Her brow furrowed as she read. Then again. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Lauren, what the hell is this?" I sat down on the second-hand stool by the island, the metal legs creaking beneath me. "That's me. Apparently, I died in 2020. She stared at the screen, scrolling. "Is this real? I mean, did you go to Mexico that year?" I nodded. "Yeah, my dad told me I needed a break. Disappear for a bit," he said. I didn't think he meant it literally. We sat there in silence, the smell of grits starting to crisp on the stove. Sophie eventually put the phone down and pulled her laptop closer. "I'm checking public records," she said. "Hang on." I watched as she typed, fast, focused. She was always better with systems, bureaucracy, finding things in the deep corners of the internet. I stared at my hands. They didn't feel like mine. She clicked again, then froze. "There's a death certificate on file," she said, "in North Carolina, filed June 15th, 2020, 3 days after the date on that document. Notarized. Lawyer listed as Franklin D. Messner. I didn't recognize the name. I'd never been to his office, never signed anything remotely like this." "They went through with it," I said, more to the air than to Sophie. "They really made me vanish. Sophie looked up at me and I saw something shift in her eyes. Not fear, but recognition. Like a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. This is why your credit score is nothing. Why you never got that health insurance approval. Why the DMV kept saying your SSN didn't match. My mouth went dry. All those little glitches. The job application that disappeared into the void. The denial letters. The time I couldn't even sign up for a grocery delivery app because it said my ID was invalid. I thought I was just unlucky, I said, voice low. Sophie shook her head. Someone made sure you stopped existing. I stood up and opened the fridge just to feel the cold air hit my face. My reflection in the metal was dull, distorted. I hadn't changed much in 4 years. Maybe a little more careful with my words. A little less willing to trust. What do? I asked quietly. We start by proving you're alive, she said. And then we find out why your parents did this. I laughed, short, bitter. I know why, the insurance. Sophie blinked. Life insurance? I don't know the details, I said, but my parents always talked about long-term planning. My mom once said she didn't believe in letting money sit idle, and my dad, he's the kind of man who calls loopholes opportunities. She grabbed her phone. I'm calling legal aid, or someone. You can't let this stand. But I was barely listening. I was back in that memory, June 2020. The humid weight of Tulum's beach, the blur of tequila and grief. I'd gone to escape them, to get away from the control, the guilt. They said they'd miss me. Said I was always too sensitive. Said I needed to disappear. And now, legally, I had. Sophie's voice brought me back. You okay? I looked at her. Number? But I'm awake. The dryer buzzed again, the same sound I'd heard minutes ago, before the email that changed everything. I bent down, slowly picking up the clothes that had fallen. On the floor was a tank top I hadn't worn since that trip, still faintly smelling of salt and sunblock. I held it up, and with a voice I barely recognized as mine, I said to no one in particular, they actually did it. They made me vanish. I didn't sleep much the night after the email. I kept picturing the death certificate, its grainy scan lines, and the smug little notary stamp. The paper said I drowned in Tulum on a Thursday in June, but I remembered that Thursday. I was lying in a cheap hotel bed, clinging to a bottle of electrolytes, sweat soaking the sheets. I didn't even make it to the water. By morning, I was at the Austin Public Library. The East Wing smelled like paperbacks, hand sanitizer, and old vents. My fingertips still trembled as I logged into a terminal. I used my middle name, Marie, on the login. Habit, safety. The clerk, a soft-voiced woman in her 50s, barely looked up when I asked how to access death records. County database, she said, nodding to a blue tab on the homepage. You'll need to know the jurisdiction. I typed North Carolina, Mecklenburg County. It loaded slower than it should have. The library's internet was always like that, like it knew how much pain you could find here if you really went digging. And then there it was. Claim paid, $250,000. Policyholder, Lauren Marie Avery. Filed by Richard Avery via Grant Holloway, Escumer date of death, June 12th, 2020. Payment released, December 5th, 2026 months. They waited 6 months before cashing me in. I leaned back, blinking up at the flickering fluorescent light above the terminal. My chest was tight. Not just the betrayal, though that too, but the precision of it. They'd waited just long enough to avoid suspicion, long enough for the world to forget me. There was a button to download supporting documents. I clicked. The packet included a notarized statement from Grant Holloway, an affidavit signed by my father, a brief 2-paragraph incident report from a clinic in Tulum, a death certificate with my name, my birthday, my social security number, even my old Charlotte address. And then I saw it, a scanned medical intake form from the Mexican clinic, dated 2 days before my drowning. Symptoms: nausea, disorientation, panic, diagnosis, heat exhaustion, patient signature, Lauren Avery. Only it wasn't my handwriting. My hands had their own memory. I'd signed enough receipts, consent forms, freelance contracts to know how my L looped. The signature was clumsy, off balance. The tail of the Y hung too low. It was a mimic, almost perfect. I stared at it, long enough for the screen to dim. Then I whispered, "They forged it." My parents had always been practical people, structured. My dad was an accountant. My mom ran logistics for a small nonprofit. I used to think that's where I got my neat handwriting and quiet discipline from. But maybe discipline was just control in a nicer outfit. I leaned forward, tapping into older emails from that year. I found the one from May 2020, a month before the retreat. Subject line, "Let this be a reset." My mom had written it. She said they'd found a wellness place in Tulum, paid in full, that it would be a chance to pause, to clear your head. And at the airport, when she hugged me goodbye, she'd whispered something strange. "This will be good for all of us." I thought she meant emotionally. I was unraveling then. Panic attacks, poor sleep, job stress. I thought they were trying to help, but when I'd landed, I lost access to my bank account. My card declined on the first day. My phone plan cut out by day 3. I emailed them, then stopped. I thought they were teaching me a boundary. I didn't know they were burying me. Back in the present, a group of teens walked past, laughing. One of them was eating chips way too loud for a library. Life was happening all around me. Meanwhile, I was unraveling in a public records portal. I returned to the insurance form. The policy number was from my old job in Charlotte. I'd signed up for the basic employee life insurance 5 years ago. When I quit, I didn't think to remove my parents as beneficiaries. There it was in black and white. Cynthia and Richard Avery, equal beneficiaries. 25 years of raising a daughter, summed up in a box next to a dollar amount. It should have been harder to die on paper. It should have required a body, a coroner, a friend to say, "No, that doesn't sound like her." But if the paperwork's clean and the story's tidy, people don't ask questions. Not when the names on the forms match the ones in your baby book. For a second, I felt guilty. I'd ghosted them. I didn't answer their emails when I got back. I didn't update my address. I wanted space. And then I realized, of course I did. They made me think I needed it. They didn't just let me disappear. They helped it happen. The thought sank in like cold water through cotton. It settled heavy in my lungs. I walked out of the library and into the Austin sunlight. There were birds in the live oak tree across the street, their chirps too sharp, too loud. A jogger passed, sweat glistening on his temple. I watched him disappear around the corner, alive in a world where people still knew his name. The cab ride from the Charlotte airport to my Airbnb passed in gray silence, just like the sky. The windows were misted from the spring rain, and every few blocks a flickering neon sign from a shuttered gas station cut through the gloom. I didn't talk much to the driver, just a polite thanks when he dropped me off near a 1950s-style diner with a faded mural of Elvis on the side. I'd rented the basement of a modest brick house down the street, small, quiet, and not traceable to my real name. The Airbnb smelled faintly of mildew and pine sol. I unpacked lightly, one duffel bag, a folder of documents, and a burner phone. On the nightstand sat a copy of Southern Living from 2009. I didn't open it. My hands were too busy trembling slightly as I reviewed the name again. Grant Holloway. That night, I made the call. "Hi, I'm handling some estate matters on behalf of the Avery family. My cousin passed abroad in 2020, and I'm trying to wrap up the final pieces of her documentation," I said, voice steady, clean. "Would you be available for a brief consult?" The receptionist booked me for the following afternoon. The next day, I slipped into the Holloway and Finch office under an umbrella that barely held off the drizzle. The building was just what I expected. Old red brick, columns, and wood-framed windows. The inside smelled like polished mahogany and nervous sweat. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. He met me in the conference room. Grant Holloway was clean-shaven, in his early 50s, with the kind of gray temples that suggested both experience and ambition. He offered me coffee. I declined. So, he began, adjusting a file folder in front of him. You're the cousin of Lauren Avery? I took a breath. Then I leaned forward just enough to feel my voice land heavy in the air. Number, I'm Lauren Avery, and I'm not dead. His face froze. The pen in his hand slipped slightly across the paper he was pretending to read. He stammered. I don't understand. You filed a death claim. Insurance. Life policy through Dominion Mutual. $250,000. He straightened, jaw tightening. That was based on official documents. From her, your father, Mr. Richard Avery. I had a certified death certificate, a notarized medical report from a clinic in Tulum, Mexico, an affidavit with the family seal. I know what you had, I said quietly. I've seen them. I'm not here to scream. I'm here to ask what else you know. For a few seconds, he didn't speak. Then he nodded toward the door. I think I should call someone. No, I interrupted, pulling my phone from my coat pocket. I already have someone. I hit record, the screen softly glowing as I set the phone face down on the table. This is off the record, unless it needs not to be. He swallowed. I had no reason to believe the documents were fake. You do now. I left the building 30 minutes later, heart racing but expression blank. I didn't give him a chance to recover, didn't wait for explanations. I walked straight back into the rain and turned the corner toward the diner. Inside, the waitress greeted me with a smile that didn't need to know my story. You want the warm kind of pie today? She asked. I nodded. Peach. She poured coffee while I slid into a vinyl booth with a sticky table and cracked sugar container. The warmth of the place, a mix of old heat lamps, fried batter, and rain-dampened coats, settled into my skin. I let myself breathe. Later that evening, I met Tessa Morales at her office. She was taller than I remembered, sharp as ever, and wore a blazer like it was armor. We hadn't seen each other since college, but I'd always known she'd end up in law somehow. When I called her the night before and explained the situation in cautious fragments, she didn't hesitate. I know what to do, she said. Come in tomorrow. Now she sat across from me, thumbing through the file I'd started. Scanned certificates, photos from my time in Mexico, the email that started it all. This isn't civil anymore, she murmured. I figured. She pulled another folder from her desk drawer. I requested the full claim packet from Dominion's internal system. A friend helped. Her fingers flipped past page after page until she stopped. Here. This is supposed to be your signed statement. It's dated July 2020. It claims you filed a last update with the company to finalize and close your own benefits before your trip. She pushed the page toward me. The signature said Lauren Avery, but I didn't write that. Not only was the handwriting unfamiliar, it had the sharp, clean angles of someone used to forging with confidence, but the wording was clinical, too clean, and the form included a phone number I'd never owned. They didn't just fake your death, Tessa said, her voice low. They created a whole closure, a system that erased you and locked the door behind. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. Outside the window, the rain had finally stopped, and the streetlights flickered across the glass like fractured halos. They didn't just bury you, Tessa said again, eyes steady. They built a case to keep you there. And for the first time since that email arrived, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a witness preparing to testify. It was a crisp morning, the kind Charlotte saves for springtime, when the air smells like damp soil and everything is either blooming or about to. I parked my rental car a few blocks away from the house I grew up in, the one with the green shutters and the camellia bushes that always bloomed early. I didn't come here for closure. I didn't come to forgive. I came because I needed them to see me breathing. I sat in the car longer than I needed to. The driveway was empty. The curtains in the upstairs bedroom swayed gently behind half-open windows. Then I saw her, my mother. She was kneeling by the edge of the garden, pulling weeds, or maybe just pretending to. The camellias were in bloom, just like always, pink and overgrown and reaching. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and gardening gloves, her posture somehow unchanged by the 4 years I'd been dead on paper. I didn't get out. I watched her move as if she were performing a choreographed routine, not a woman who signed her daughter off as gone. My phone buzzed. One word from Noah. Here. I met him at Marlowe's Cafe, just across from the old white brick church where we used to sing hymns every Sunday. The cafe hadn't changed. The smell of cinnamon and warm pastry hit me like a memory. I picked the corner booth, the same one we used to cram into after choir practice. When he walked in, his hair was shorter, a bit of gray creeping in at the temples. His eyes, though, were unmistakably Avery. So was the nervous energy. He ordered mint tea, the same flavor he used to chew gum with obsessively as a kid when he was anxious. He saw me, and he froze. I raised a hand. Hey, Noah. He didn't sit right away, just stood there, blinking like he'd seen a ghost. In his case, I guess he had. Lauren. His voice cracked. You're alive? I said, sliding a cup of tea toward the empty seat across from me. That's the word, yeah. He finally sat, took the tea, didn't drink it. You're not mad? He asked after a moment. I mean, I thought you were gone. Really gone. I leaned forward. Did you ever question it? He exhaled slowly. They said you were in Mexico, that there was an accident. Dad said it was better not to talk about it. I let the silence stretch, then said, There's a document, a death certificate, with my name. My social security number, my birthday, I didn't see it, he said quickly. I never saw that stuff. I nodded. But you got the money. His lips parted in protest, then closed. He looked away. It came through a trust, he muttered. Dad called it an early inheritance. And you didn't think to ask why your 27-year-old sister had a will. Noah's jaw tightened. I didn't want to know. That stung more than I expected. I reached into my bag and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. A scan of the payout ledger. His name, listed under secondary beneficiaries. He pushed it away. I didn't know, Lauren, I swear. I didn't know they filed something. Who's they? I asked. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a USB stick, set it down like it burned. I found this on Dad's laptop, he said. Emails, legal stuff. I didn't read all of it, but one had your name. Subject line said something about finalizing a narrative. My hand trembled slightly as I took it. I plugged it into my tablet and opened the top folder. Dozens of emails, attachments, legal docs, insurance communication. And there it was. Subject, finalizing medical narrative for Lauren's file. Confirm unconscious admission. I clicked it, read it aloud. To whom it may concern, per our previous correspondence, please confirm that Lauren Avery's unconscious admission was noted at Playa del Mar Clinic on June 9th, 2020. The narrative should match existing records to ensure processing compliance. Noah's hand clenched around his teacup. I thought it was an inheritance, he whispered again. That narrative? It wasn't just fiction. It was forged. They used my panic episode, my real illness. He shook his head slowly. He'll never admit it, not even to himself. Just then, something shifted outside the cafe. Through the window, I saw a familiar silhouette. My mother. She stood by the lamppost, hands in her pockets, looking directly at us. She didn't come in. She didn't wave. After a moment, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the spring morning. I think, I said, more to myself than to Noah, she already knows the ending to this story. Noah didn't answer. He just stirred the mint tea he still hadn't touched. That was the family I left behind, and the family I was about to confront, with every lie they signed in my name. Walking into the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, I wasn't trying to prove I was alive. That part was easy. I had a pulse, a driver's license, a signature that didn't match the ones they forged. What I came to prove was something colder, something heavier. I came to prove that my own parents had orchestrated a lie, and they'd done it so well that the system played along. I came to prove they were liars. The courthouse echoed with the slow shuffle of footsteps and the soft thud of doors closing behind people who couldn't turn back. I wore the same coat I'd worn 4 years ago when I boarded that flight to Mexico. It was navy wool, a little worn at the cuffs, with a tiny tear near the left pocket where my keys had always lived. I ran my hand along it like a tether. Tessa walked beside me, steady and composed. She had a way of smoothing tension with her presence alone. Behind us was Marla Deacon, the insurance investigator who'd quietly pulled every string needed to get this case seen in court. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble. I could feel the eyes before I saw them. Is that her? She's supposed to be dead, right? I kept my gaze forward. Richard and Cynthia were already seated when we entered the courtroom. Richard wore a pressed gray suit, perfectly tailored, like he was attending a fundraiser instead of a hearing. Cynthia wore a pale blue blouse and a string of pearls I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. She didn't look at me. Neither of them did. But I saw the shift, barely perceptible, as I walked past their row. Richard's hand gripped the edge of the table just a bit too hard. Their lawyer, a man named Dalton Crane, stood and immediately asked the judge for a continuance. "We believe there may be an issue of mistaken identity, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "Given the nature of the original documents, we request time to verify." Tessa cut in. "Your Honor, my client has already undergone biometric verification, including fingerprint and voice print confirmation, all matched against her employment records and federal documents. She is Lauren Avery." The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, didn't even blink. "Request denied. Proceed." Marla was called first. She took the stand with the kind of poise only someone who's seen the worst of corporate fraud can develop. Her testimony was clinical, precise. She confirmed the fingerprint match, the voice print match, a 98% confidence rating on facial recognition. She read from her report without falter. Then came Noah. He sat stiffly, hands clasped, the knot in his tie slightly askew. He glanced at me once, just once, before facing the court. "I received funds," he said quietly, "from what I was told was an inheritance." I didn't ask questions. I should have. I knew she wasn't really gone. I just didn't want to know why she stayed away. "Did you review any of the documents submitted with the insurance claim?" the judge asked. He nodded. "After she came back, yes. I found emails. One had a fabricated medical narrative. Another included a scanned document with her signature, but it wasn't her handwriting." "Do you believe the claim was submitted fraudulently?" the judge pressed. Noah swallowed. "Yes. I do." Cynthia never took the stand. She didn't speak, but her eyes found mine once, just once, when Noah mentioned the forged medical report. Her lip trembled, but nothing fell. No apology, no recognition, just the shimmer of something unspoken. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the front, and faced the court. "I was never missing," I said. "I was written off." I told them about the retreat my parents booked, the panic I felt that week in Mexico, the heat, the dehydration, the illness that blurred my memory. I told them how I came back and tried to move forward, thinking I was the one who had chosen silence. I thought I was setting boundaries. What I didn't know was that, while I was trying to heal, they were burying me in paperwork. "They used my real sickness," I said. "They turned a panic episode into a death scene." I held up the certificate. "This says I drowned. I didn't. I threw up in a cheap motel bathroom and slept for 3 days. I lost my passport, not my life." I looked at the judge. If I hadn't seen that email, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be dead in every legal system in the country, and they'd be sipping tea in a paid-off house, pretending I never existed. Silence filled the room, the kind that's not empty but pregnant with too much weight. The judge nodded once. Then she reached for her gavel. Effective immediately, this court reinstates the legal identity of Lauren Avery, she said clearly. All documents referencing her death are to be voided. All assets tied to the insurance claim are frozen pending further investigation. Tessa exhaled beside me. Marla nodded once, satisfied. Then the judge turned to Richard. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Avery?" He looked straight ahead, said nothing, but I saw it. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickered, just for a second. Not quite guilt, not quite fear, something murkier. He knew the game had changed, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt real, not just alive, but undeniable. They wanted my silence. I gave them my story instead. Mid-July in Austin carried a heat that lingered even in the shade, but inside the old bakery-turned community center, the air was cool. The windows opened just enough to let the breeze stir the flyers taped to the glass. One read, "Second State, a new beginning for survivors of identity fraud." Below it, in simple handwriting, was our motto, "You are not a ghost. You are still here." I stood at the front of the open space, a pitcher of citrus water sweating on the table beside me. Around 20 folding chairs filled the room. Sophie flitted between attendees, checking that everyone had signed the guest log, handing out pens and little welcome cards that smelled faintly of lavender from her bag. She had insisted we use real paper instead of a QR code. It slows people down, makes it feel human. I glanced down at my notes. The nonprofit paperwork had just gone through the week before. Second State was official. So was I. Lauren Avery, legally reinstated, fully visible again. Tessa joined by video call, her face steady on the mounted screen behind me. She waved, offered a warm hello, and reminded everyone that legal help didn't have to be cold or complicated. "You have options," she said. "More than you think." Then it was my turn. I took a breath, not the kind you take to calm nerves, but the kind that tells your body, yes, this is real. I looked at the group, people of all ages and backgrounds, gathered not because they were curious, but because they knew, firsthand or secondhand, what it felt like to be erased. "I'm not here today because I won a case," I said. "I'm here because I lost something and had to build it back, piece by piece." I told them the story, not with rage, not anymore. I let it unfold like thread from a spool, the fake certificate, the legal battle, my brother's quiet confession, my parents' silence. I kept my voice even, my tone steady, not because it didn't hurt, but because I wanted the story to stand taller than the pain. A woman in the second row raised her hand. My cousin went through something similar. Her ex-husband used her old documents to claim she was mentally unfit, took her name off the mortgage. Another voice chimed in. "Can this happen to men too?" "It happens to anyone," I said, "that someone wants erased." There was a quiet hum of acknowledgement. Someone passed around homemade empanadas. Another poured iced hibiscus tea from a glass carafe. The room didn't feel like a meeting. It felt like a table, set for something honest. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the chairs were stacked, I returned to the small table where Sophie had placed a metal dish, one we'd used at our first apartment together to catch keys and spare change. Today, it held something different. I opened the envelope, the death certificate, still crisp, still notarized, still bearing my name, my date of birth, my fabricated date of death. I didn't hesitate. I struck a match and held the flame just beneath the corner. The paper curled inward, blackened, then folded on itself like a breath being exhaled for the last time. I watched it crumble to ash in silence. Sophie didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I picked up a flyer, one of the leftover ones from our session, and flipped it over. With a pencil, I sketched something rough but familiar. A bird rising from flames. Its wings weren't perfect, but they were outstretched, defiant, lifting above a jagged line that once resembled my forged signature. A phoenix rising not from fire but from paper. I looked out the window as the sunlight shifted across the wooden floor. I hadn't come back to haunt the people who buried me. I came back to live. When I watched the last piece of that false death certificate turn to ash, it wasn't about revenge, it was about release. I had spent years wondering if silence could protect me, only to learn that silence is how people disappear. Sometimes, the hardest thing is speaking up when you've been taught to stay quiet, especially by those who were supposed to love you. But healing begins the moment we choose our voice over our fear. And no matter how far gone we feel, dignity and truth have a way of finding their way home. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or share it with someone who might need a little reminder. You are never too far gone to come back to yourself.